Hey guys, welcome to this session by Intellipaat. Cloud computing is one of the most spoken about technologies of this decade. And according to Forbes, by 2020, 80% of the IT workload would be on the cloud. So basically this means there will be a huge availability of jobs on the cloud domain. Also guys, before moving on with this video, please subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our upcoming videos. So now let us take a quick glance at the agenda. To start off with, we'll take a quick introduction to cloud computing. After that, we'll look at the advantages of cloud computing. Moving on, we'll look at various cloud products, and then we'll move on to cloud computing deployment models and cloud computing service models. And finally, we'll look at various cloud providers. Also guys, if you want to do an end-to-end certification on cloud, Intellipaat provides a certification training for solutions architect in both AWS and Azure, and those details are available in description. Now let us go ahead with this session.
Introduction to cloud computing. So what is cloud computing exactly? Let's understand that as we move along. So guys, cloud computing is nothing but the use of remote servers on the internet to do a particular task, right? Now you would ask, like, why do we need to connect to remote computers when I can do everything on my personal computer? Now imagine if you have an application which requires a lot of processing, right? So what will you do? Will you buy a server which has a lot of processing power, put your application over there, and then see how your application is functioning? Or if I give you one more option, that you can rent a server from a cloud provider and basically do a RDP or an SSH into that, put your application over there and see the working of that application, how it runs. And I'll also tell you that the moment you are done with the server, you can just give it back to me and I'll charge you only for the time that you used it. On top of that, what if I tell you that it's as cheap as $0.0005 per hour? Isn't that amazing? And that is exactly what cloud computing is all about, guys. So cloud computing, for a beginner, it's nothing but the use of remote servers for a personal needs, right? And rather than using our own computers or rather than buying servers of our own, I just want to rent a server on a cloud and I will pay them accordingly to the time that I have used, and the prices are as low as the figure that I just told you, right? So this is what cloud computing is, guys. Now you would wonder how it actually came into the picture, right? So let's go ahead and understand that. Alright guys, so let's take an example to understand this. Imagine you're a developer and you created your first app, which you think is going to be a hit, right? So how do you make this app available to the world, right? Or how do you make this app or website available to the world? So what do? You buy some servers and you put that application over there, right? And just putting your application on the servers would not do it. You'll have to connect it to the internet. And once you connect it to the internet, that is when people start to come on your application, come on your website and start to use it. All right. So this is how typically work used to be done. Now I want to take your focus onto certain things that I just said when I was explaining you this example. First of all, I will have to buy these servers. Right? And guys, servers are not cheap. They're very expensive, and buying a stack of servers will already cost you a lot of money. And you're not even sure whether your app will be a hit or not, right? You've just created your app and you want to try it out and you put it on some servers, and because you want to make it production grade, obviously you'll have to buy a stack of servers, which is going to cost you a lot, right? Second thing is, you will have to configure everything manually. If these servers have to be connected to the internet, you will have to do the connections, to this servers manually. You'll have to set up a static IP address. So you'll have to contact your ISP and say that, I need a static IP address for my server so that people can just go to one particular address and they can visit it. After that, you again have to buy a domain. Let's say if you go to Intellipaat.com, you see the website, right? So what is happening? Intellipaat.com in the backend, the domain is getting converted into an IP address by a DNS server, and then that IP address is basically pointing to the servers, right? So you will have to buy a domain, you will have to point that domain to these servers, and that's how it used to work, right? And obviously if you have these servers, you'll have to hire a team also who's gonna manage these servers. In case the number of users increase, you'll have to increase the number of servers, etc, etc. There are a lot of things that you'll have to do. And because of these things, there were some problems, and because we wanted to overcome these problems, we use cloud computing. right? Now, like I said, you were using this kind of an architecture before. Now, let's see if we don't use this kind of an architecture and I just use cloud computing, what is going to be the difference? The difference will be that I created my application. Next thing is I'll go to AWS, I'll launch a stack of servers, I'll put my application over there. AWS automatically gives me a static IP address. It has a service to basically give me a domain name as well. I would just configure my domain name to connect to this IP address and I'm done, right?
Okay guys, a quick info. If you want to do an end-to-end certification on solutions architect on either AWS or Azure, we Intellipaat provide a complete certification course on that, and those details are available in the description. Now let us continue with this session.
It's so much ease that I don't have to hire a team to manage my servers because AWS says whatever servers you want to launch, I'm going to handle it for you. Not AWS, it's in fact any cloud provider for that matter. All the servers are managed by them. All the hardware upgradations are managed by them. Everything is managed by the cloud provider. And that is why cloud computing model itself is such a big hit, right? So what are the advantages? The first thing is that there is little or no investment. So I don't have to buy a stack of servers to get my application up and ready. I can just rent them, right? And the cost is minimal for launching the stack of servers and basically getting them up and ready, right? I don't have to invest much. Even though I'm starting fresh, I've just launched my application. I don't need seed money for setting up an infrastructure, which is going to be huge for the whole world to see. Right? The whole world can access your application, but you don't have to worry about it because AWS is backing you up, right? So there is little or no investment. Second thing is more focus on app development. So you can focus more on app development than worrying about whether my infrastructure is fine or not. How is the traffic coming onto my app? Is my infrastructure scalable enough that it can handle all the traffic which is coming onto it? Everything is managed by AWS once you configure it correctly, right? Third thing is it requires less workforce. So like I said, if you are buying your own servers, you obviously have to have a team which is going to manage your servers for you, right? Any hardware upgradations, any security patch that you have to do, all of that is done by a team. Correct. But if you are launching your infrastructure or if you're creating your infrastructure on any cloud provider, the cloud provider's headache is to manage the servers. It's their headache to do the security patches. It's their headache to improve or upgrade the hardware once the processors become slow. So all of that is managed by your cloud provider, and all you will do is focus on your app, focus on your business goals, and then succeed towards the goal that you have, right? So this is an advantage that you get when you use cloud computing, and that is why most of the companies today, so I guess only the companies who started out earlier, that is before cloud computing came into the picture, are still working on their own servers, hosting their own applications. But companies who are very young, who have just started out, for example, startups particularly, they prefer cloud computing or they prefer their servers to be on the cloud, because obviously when you are starting off with a new company, you have very limited amount of money that you can invest on things, right? So it's always a good idea to invest on the things which are required, and rest, if it works in a certain way that they are not costing you much, it works that way, right? So for startups especially, cloud computing is a huge thing. It's a huge bonus, and that is why you can see a lot of new business ideas are coming in. A lot of new people are trying out their own app or their own websites to provide a particular service. Reason being, the major part of starting up a business was setting up the infrastructure that is handled by cloud computing these days, right? And that is why you can see more and more young companies are coming up and they are trying out an app. If they fail, there was little investment involved in it, so it doesn't matter. And that is what is encouraging the entrepreneurs of this age. So guys, these are the advantages of cloud computing. Moving forward now, because cloud computing is so huge, there are a lot of products which are available on cloud these days, right? And you won't even know whether they exist in cloud or not. For example, Netflix is the biggest example that everyone is probably using every day in their life. The popular service Netflix, which is a movie streaming service, its entire infrastructure is on AWS. Everything from A to Z, the scaling part, the content delivery network, the networking part, the security part, everything is handled by AWS. Now, don't worry guys, if you don't understand the jargons that are just used, like content delivery network, security, everything I'll explain in this video. For now, I just want to tell you guys that because of the advantages that cloud computing has to offer, and because of the kind of services that you get from cloud, companies such big such as Netflix, Airbnb, Amazon itself are relying on the infrastructure of the cloud providers so that they never go down. Now, how did it come to these companies' minds to, switch to cloud? So I'll give you a very small example.
Okay guys, a quick info. If you want to do an end-to-end certification on Solutions Architect on either AWS or Azure, we Intellipaat provide a complete certification course on that, and those details are available in the description. Now let us continue with this session.
Netflix suffered a huge blackout on the internet, I think in somewhere around 2008 or 2009, wherein all the services were down. Why? Because the more number of users came up to use the service, and that's when the service crashed, right? The whole application went down, and it caused a huge loss to the Netflix company itself, right? And that is when they decided, dude, I cannot manage all my servers. I can either do the app development or I can manage the servers. There's only one thing that I can do. So then Netflix started to migrate itself on the AWS infrastructure, which is highly scalable, which is highly available, right? And now seldom do you see that, Netflix services down. In my experience, I've never seen Netflix down since I've been using it from the past 2-3 years. I've never seen Netflix down, or I've never seen an error that, the server is out or there's a problem with the infrastructure. I've never seen that, right? And that is because of the high availability that is provided by the cloud providers these days. Netflix is just one example. Other businesses that we are all aware of is the Amazon e-commerce website, right? The Amazon e-commerce website is also hosted on the AWS infrastructure, right? Now, a company, an e-commerce website whose bread and butter comes from a website, from being online, right? Imagine they are relying on the AWS infrastructure that all of you guys also have, access to, right? So imagine yourself, you're sharing the same infrastructure which the biggest e-commerce company in the world is using. So you can be rest assured that your application is in safe hands, right? Another great example of cloud computing is Google Drive. So Google Drive is a cloud product. The Google Documents, the Google Drive where you can upload all your files and folders, they're all hosted on the Google Cloud, right? And that is again a fantastic cloud product. Then we have Airbnb, which is actually a website which is hosted on AWS, and it's fully hosted on AWS for all its functionalities, scalabilities, and availability. Prime Video, which is video streaming service for Amazon, that is also hosted on AWS. And the funny thing is Netflix, which is its biggest competitor, is also hosted on the same infrastructure as Amazon Prime Video, right? Awesome, isn't it? So these were all the products that you see in your day-to-day life that are actually cloud products, and you wouldn't even know whether they were on cloud or not. So now you know. Moving further, guys, now let's talk about the cloud computing models. What are the different kind of models that are in cloud that are there in cloud computing, and what are models exactly? So guys, cloud computing is basically divided into two kind of models. The first model is the deployment model, and the second model is the service model. So how do we get these two categories? The way you can deploy on cloud has 3 ways to it, and the way you can access services on cloud has again 3 ways to it. Right? So one is about putting your application out there. So if you're putting your application out there, you have 3 options, either to use public cloud, private cloud, or hybrid cloud. If you're using a service from cloud, you again have 3 options, which is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Let's understand all these things one by one. Don't get carried away with all the big words used here. We'll understand each and everything one by one, and then as you move along, if you have any questions, you can put it, right? So far, guys, I've not got any questions. I guess everything is crystal clear to everyone. So moving forward in the next slide, I'm going to start with the deployment model. So if you have any questions, now is the time, guys. You can ask me all out and I'll be happy to answer it for you. All right. So Shambhavi has a question, and she says that Netflix is using AWS. So that means all the videos that we see are also hosted on AWS. Yes, Shambhavi, all the videos that you see, the software itself, the website, exists on AWS. Okay, so she has one more question. But when I install the Netflix app it's available on my mobile. How is that on cloud? Okay, so Shamvi, there are two sides to it. Netflix application, it's basically a client application. The videos that you get, they don't exist on your phone. They're actually streamed from the internet, right? So your Netflix application is just a client application, but it interacts with the AWS servers on which the Netflix servers have been deployed. All the videos that you see, there's a service called Amazon S3. All those videos, they exist over there, they're stored over there, and they are basically provided to you using a content delivery network, which is basically nothing but a caching system. That is, I'll give you a very simple example, that if you are residing, let's say in India, and you are watching, let's say, a US television show. So obviously that US television show is would be existing on the servers of the Netflix US, right?
Okay guys, a quick info. If you want to do an end-to-end certification on Solutions Architect on either AWS or Azure, we Intellipaat provide a complete certification course on that, and those details are available in the description. Now let us continue with this session.
But if you are viewing in India, it doesn't make sense to stream all the way from US your video, right? So the server has to be connected through the internet from the US to the Indian client app which is existing on your phone. That's a long way, right? And that's when the concept of latency comes in, wherein how does an application respond to your queries also depends on how far is the server from your application, right? So there's a service called Content Delivery Network, which basically what it does is it caches all the videos that you have to see or you're watching onto an Indian server if you are in India, right? And that's when, a server which is nearer to you has all the content which exists on the US server. And this is all on demand, right? So this is just very simple, a very small thing that Netflix does to improve its service using the AWS infrastructure. And this concept that I just told you is Content Delivery Network. Don't worry if you don't understand what I just told you. As we move along, I'm going to explain this in detail. All right. Any more questions, guys? All right, so everybody is giving me a go. All right, guys, so if everything is crystal clear, let's go ahead and discuss the models one by one. So the first model that we're going to discuss is the deployment model. So what are deployment models? So guys, deployment models are nothing but the various ways using which we can deploy our application. All right, now there are various ways. Let's look at those ways one by one. This is the first way of deploying your application on the cloud infrastructure is called public cloud. Now, what is public cloud? Public cloud are the servers which are offered by your cloud provider, in which each server can have multiple companies hosting their application. All right, it could be your Netflix, and it could be that your its competitor, that is Prime Video. If you have offered for public cloud, your application would share the same server as some other application. It could be Prime Video as well, right? So, but why is there a segregation? Although there is no problem when there are multiple applications on the same server, but what happens is some companies are still skeptic. Some companies have data policies that they say that we have confidential data and we cannot take any risk where some other companies also on our server, and there's a risk of our data being hacked into, right? So that's why, because of these data policies, there were different deployment models that were created. So like I said, public cloud is when the data that you're providing to the cloud is not that sensitive, is not that confidential, and hence you are okay when AWS tells you, although there will be no problem when a separate application is also deployed on the same server, there will be no harm to your data, and they say like, okay, anyways, we don't have any data policies like that, right? So public cloud is when you are using or the cloud computings or the cloud providers servers, and you allow them to host more applications on the same server. You're okay with that fact. All right, so that is public cloud. Next is private cloud. What is private cloud? Private cloud can be two things. The first thing is, like I said, if you want a separate server all for yourself, where you say, no matter how much space is empty, no matter how much of the server is free, I don't want any other company's data on my server. I want my data to be isolated. I want it to be isolated on this particular server that you have in your infrastructure. So that becomes a private cloud. The second way of creating a private cloud is you buy your own servers and you create your own cloud in your data center, right? That is, you buy all the stack of servers required and you host your application as if you're hosting on a cloud provider. It's just that it's your own cloud that that you have created, right? You have bought your own servers and you're putting your data on your own servers. So that is private cloud. Okay. So the third thing is hybrid cloud. Now, what is hybrid cloud, guys? When you want to have a kind of infrastructure wherein you are using some of the public cloud and some of the servers from the private cloud, in that case, it becomes a hybrid cloud. So let me give you an example. Let's say there is a research company. So that research company, the marketing website for that research company exists on the public cloud, but on that marketing website also people have the access to log in, and when they log in they can see their research materials that they're working on. Okay, but this research material, it does not exist on the server of the public cloud. It exists on some other server which is private cloud. So from a user's perspective, I will say that it seems that everything is on the same website, but actually the infrastructure is like this, that the private cloud is or your sensitive or your research files are basically on some other server, or let's say the private cloud, right? And the website that you're hosting, which doesn't have that much of confidential data, is actually hosted on the public cloud, right? So this is a fine example of how a hybrid kind of architecture is created. One more example that I can think on top of my head is that let's say there's a company wherein it's been there since the past 15 years, right? So they have some legacy systems that they don't want to touch, which they have bought and on which the application is working. But what they have decided now is that any of the servers that we are going to launch from now on, any of the new applications that we are going to launch from now on, we are going to launch it on a cloud provider server, right? So in that case, what happens is these servers which were there in your data center, they have to be on the same network as the cloud provider's servers, right? That is a public cloud, and hence that kind of a mixture or that kind of a arrangement again becomes a hybrid cloud. So guys, these are all the cases wherein you can, or these are all the ways you can deploy your application on cloud. So first we discussed public cloud, which was basically when the servers they can be shared between multiple clients of the cloud provider, right? And basically those servers are owned by the cloud provider. Second is private cloud, wherein there are two cases. The first case could be that you own or you ask your cloud provider to give you a separate server stack where no other data will be available, only your data will be available. That is one kind of private cloud. Second kind of private cloud is when you buy your own servers and you set up a data center and that becomes your own private cloud. That is also a way of creating a private cloud or using a private cloud. Third kind of deployment is a hybrid deployment, wherein you use some servers from the public cloud and you use some servers from the private cloud, and hence it's called hybrid. All right. So guys, any doubt in whatever we have discussed so far? If yes, please comment in the chat box or put your question in the chat box and I'll be happy to answer it for you. Any doubts, guys? If there are no doubts, we'll move forward. But if any doubts, now is the time that you can mention it and I'll clear it for you. All right, so Shubham is saying, can you explain private cloud once more? Sure, Shubham. So private cloud is nothing but using a server which is not shared by anyone else, right? So how does AWS work, or how does any cloud provider work for that matter? They buy a very big machine or very big server with a lot of RAM and with a lot of processing power, right? And what they do is they launch multiple instances of virtual machines on it, right? So it could be that, you imagine your laptop, you can probably, if it's a i3 or it's a i5 with around 8 GB of RAM, you can launch around 3 operating systems on the same server at the same time using a virtual machine, right? You can do that. Now, similarly, what cloud providers do is they buy a stack of servers, and what they do is they launch multiple virtual machines on that server, right? And those virtual machines are owned by people who basically launch it through the AWS console or the Azure console or the GCP console, right? They launch it from there. Now, when your application or when your instance is up and ready, it is actually a part, or it's actually a virtual machine which is a part of a server. But it could be that same server is hosting 7 or 8 more virtual machines which are owned by other people who have created their Azure or GCP accounts, correct? So if that is the case, then there are some companies like let's take the example of government agencies, government secret agencies, which or intelligence agencies like CIA, or in CIA in US, like Homeland Department in US. All of them, they have very confidential data which have to be accessed by their internal employees, irrespective of the fact where they are sitting and in what part of the world they are sitting. Right now, in those kind of cases, what happens is, although they can buy their own servers, they can set up everything by themselves also, but then, like I said, they'll have to hire a team also that will manage the servers. So what cloud providers do is they give you an option of having your own server stack, which is isolated from the rest of the infrastructure of your cloud provider. Right, that server stack is exclusively for you. It'll be a little higher, the price will be a little higher, but it'll again be on a pay as you go model. That is, you can say that for how much ever time you'll be using it, for that much time only you'll have to pay the cloud provider. So that is what private cloud is, that you get a separate isolated server for yourself on which you will be working. You will be putting your applications on it, right? And those applications will nowhere be connected to or nowhere will be sharing the infrastructure which the other clients of that cloud provider are using. So that is private cloud. Other way of saying what a private cloud is, that you buy your own servers and you set up in a data center, right? So although in that case you're not getting the benefits of cloud computing, but yes, that also is called a private cloud, because you buy the same kind of infrastructure, you buy the same kind of infrastructure at scale, at the same scale that a cloud provider does. You buy it at the same scale, right? When I say scale, in the same quantity, you set up a data center according to it, and it becomes your own private mini cloud, right? That is also what a private cloud is. So, all right, I guess Shubham, now you're clear with the doubt. All right, thanks, Shubham. So others, if there is any doubt in whatever I've explained so far, please let me know. I'll clear your doubts. And if not, I will move forward to our next topic. All right, so everybody is giving me a go, guys. So great. Let's move on to a next topic, which are service models. So we have discussed deployment models. That is, what are the various ways in which I can deploy my application on a cloud provider. Now let's discuss the various kind of services that I can get from a cloud provider. Okay, so let's discuss that. So what are service models? Now guys, there are three kind of service models that we get in cloud computing. The first one is infrastructure as a service. Now what is infrastructure as a service? Basically, the cloud provider will give you an access to the server. That is, you will get an access to the operating system of the server, and you can install anything you want in that server, and that will become, it can either become a database server, it can become a website server, it can become anything. So basically, when we say infrastructure as a service, you're getting the whole infrastructure, you're getting the whole system, you're getting the whole virtual machine as a service delivered to you. Right? So that is infrastructure as a service. Second is platform as a service. So in contrary to what we got in infrastructure as a service, wherein I got a machine that I could use, in platform as a service, I do not get the access to the operating system. Okay, what I do get an access to is kind of like a dashboard, wherein in that dashboard I can upload any files that I want, and those files would automatically be put on the server by AWS, and I can see those files hosted on the server. If it's confusing, let me give you an example. Let's say if I want to set up a website and what I get is infrastructure as a service. So in that case, what I'll have to do is I'll get a fresh operating system. On that operating system, I'll have to install a web hosting software like Apache or Tomcat or anything. Once I have installed it, I will have to do an FTP, or I will have to transfer my files from a local computer on that AWS server using FTP. Once I've done that, I have to put those files in a specific folder on that particular server, and only then I will be able to access it when I go to the IP address of that particular server. This is the case of infrastructure as a service, where I've done everything that I had to do, right? In case of platform as a service, what happens is that I will not get the access to the operating system. All the softwares, all the settings that are required to be done is done by AWS. What I do get an access to is a dashboard where I'll have a button called upload. I click on that upload button, and what it'll do is it'll upload my website automatically. It will directly upload it to the location where it has to be. It'll give it the required permission so that my website is hosted. So as a user, I don't have to get into the nitty-gritties of what kind of software has to be installed, what version of software has to be there. Everything is managed by AWS. I just upload my website and my website gets up and ready on a particular IP address. Okay, so this is platform as a service. It's basically an automated version of infrastructure as a service where you get specific access on the server that you can just upload your files. There is nothing else that you can control on that server. That is platform as a service. The third kind of service that you get is software as a service. Right? What happens in software as a service is that, in contrary to what you got in infrastructure as a service, wherein I did not get access to the server, or where I got access to the operating system of the server. I could install anything, I could make that server anything. Right? Second thing was platform as a service, where I got a dashboard where I can still upload my files, and those files will be hosted for me. Rest everything else will be managed by AWS or the cloud provider on which I'm taking this service from. Third kind of service is software as a service. Now, what is software as a service? You do not get access to a dashboard where you can upload your files. You do not get access to the server where you can do whatever you want on the operating system. What you do get is a software which has already been hosted on the cloud, and that software you can use. The straightaway example for this would be Netflix. So Netflix is a software, correct? It doesn't matter which server it is on. It doesn't matter whether you can upload your files or not, but you can use the software which is hosted on the cloud. That is software as a service. Software has been provided to you by the cloud provider to use as a service, and that service is a pay-as-you-go service wherein you'll have to do a monthly subscription. Okay. Another example for this could be the Google Docs that you use. You use Google Excel, or you use Google Word, right? All of those are softwares which are hosted on the cloud provider, and you can use those softwares. It doesn't matter which server it exists on. It doesn't matter what kind of softwares are installed on that server. I just have one software that I can use, and it has been hosted on the cloud. So that is software as a service. All right. So this is all about the different cloud models which exist, which are offered to the customers, right? Moving forward, now let's talk about cloud providers. Now, whatever we have discussed so far is in general or is generic to cloud computing, right? Now, these kind of models or these business models that we just discussed have been adopted by various companies which are out there. Right? So companies like AWS is there. This is the most prominent one. Second is Microsoft Azure, and then you have Google Cloud, and there are 100 plus more companies which give you the same kind of services. Like another famous cloud provider which comes on the top of my mind is DigitalOcean, which is there, right? Which offers the same services, just that the jargons that it uses for giving you that service is different. The terminologies would be different, but at the back end, it's doing exactly the same thing, right? So DigitalOcean is there, Joint is there, Telemark is there, IBM Cloud is there. There are a lot of cloud providers. But why have I just showed you these three cloud providers? Because these are the three top cloud providers in the industry right now which give the cloud services. Okay, I'll say 90% of the whole cloud paradigm is actually covered by just these three cloud providers. That is, people, if there are 100 people who are using the cloud computing in the world, out of them 90 people would be using a service among these three only.
Okay guys, a quick info. If you want to do an end-to-end certification on solutions architect on either AWS or Azure, we Intellipaat provide a complete certification course on that, and those details are available in the description. Okay guys, we've come to the end of this session. I hope this session was informative and helpful. If you have any queries regarding this session, please leave a comment below and we'll love to help you out. Thank you.